Two Middle East diplomats tell MS Now that Iran and Oman have agreed to the outlines of a deal that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But they declined to describe what's exactly in that deal, and all of it kind of remains unresolved at this point. With the war in Iran now in its 6th month, Vice President J.D. Vance briefed Senate Republicans on what comes next. Those senators are sure to face a lot of questions about the war and the cost of it when they head home this weekend. Constituents are not pleased. Politico reports some of the lawmakers push Vance and the administration for more transparency, especially considering the vast unpopularity of this war. MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid is in Dubai for us. Jake and Mark are still with us. Inzamam, bring us up to speed on what the state of this deal may be between Oman and Iran. What could it look like? And how soon could we see the strait reopened?
Well, Ariel, there's been a lot of optimism from Iranians that I've been speaking to throughout the week that this deal is pretty much finalized and that it's ready to be rolled out. A deal between Iran and Oman effectively looking at how they can manage the Strait of Hormuz temporarily before there is a kind of permanent solution in place. And a couple of Iranian sources who are in fact linked with this deal that I was speaking to throughout the week said to me that it has been finalized. It includes the fact that all inbound traffic would effectively go through Iranian territorial waters and outbound traffic would pass through near to the Omani coast. The officials also said to me that there would be no fees and tolls in this agreement and that this is a temporary agreement that would effectively kickstart another 60 days for discussions to take place around that memorandum of understanding, remember, which was signed in mid-June between the US and Iran. But there's been concern over the last 24 hours or so because they've said that this is ready to go, but it still needs to pass through a couple of stages. It needs to get approval from the supreme leader, whether he's alive and is actually able to approve it. It also needs to get approval from Iran's Supreme Council. That includes the military, the IRGC, the guys who have effectively been attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz for the past 5 months. And the sense that I'm getting, Ariel, from conversations that I'm having is that there is a sticking point here, and that's the fact that it's not entirely clear whether the US naval blockade would be lifted in the Strait of Hormuz to essentially then have this deal go forward. And if that isn't the case, then I don't think the IRGC will essentially pass this deal and approve it. And that would obviously mean that this whole negotiation that's been taking place over the last couple of months is effectively dead in the water. But this is something that clearly the Iranians and the Omanis are trying to work towards, along with the mediators, Pakistan and Qatar too. So we're in this kind of state of limbo once again, as we have been for quite some time with this whole conflict. But the latest is that we're just waiting for this official sign-off and then the official announcement from the two countries.
Yeah, and it may be that we don't know how the U.S. is going to respond to potentially lifting its blockade because we know that the U.S. and Iran are not speaking directly. Of course, there are probably conduits speaking behind the scenes. But, Mark, when you hear Inzamam say something like the Iranians are optimistic, red flags about any kind of situation where the Iranians would be optimistic. How concerning or how detrimental could it be to the president's case on this war that Iran appears to be calling the shots in the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, it's politically potentially devastating, especially within his own party. I mean, I think he's obviously trying to project control for someone who has, complete authority over this situation. Obviously he doesn't. And I think, again, to the midterms and to how people perceive this, any of these ins and outs and just this ongoing negotiation, which seems to have, whether the Iranians are optimistic or not, seems to have no end in sight, is not going to, one, provide any pricing relief, certainly on gas prices anytime soon, at least on a consistent level, but also is something that I think that polls will show that voters are either tuned out or certainly dug in a way that their opinion on this war, which is very dubious, is not going to change one way or the other.
Let's talk for a second about those who are in control of this war. The president seems, at least right now, to be standing publicly by Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's insisting that there's no issue also with U.S. THAAD and Patriot and other system supplies, despite all of the reporting to the contrary. He seems to have been acquiescing a bit that this is on his radar, at least, but not admitting that it's a full-scale problem. Just how big of a concern is it that we have this depletion of U.S. munitions, and could this be the issue that actually drives the irreparable wedge between President Trump and Hegseth?
Well, I mean, I think certainly the issue is real. I mean, if the Washington Post report, I think it was the Washington Post, right? Yeah. The report earlier this week was devastating. And it was also, I think, if you look at how the White House and the DOD reacted, I mean, they were really, really upset about this. And you wonder sort of, is Trump upset about the report because, in fact, it puts you at a tactical disadvantage and now it's public? Or is he just upset about it because of the leaks? I mean, he seems to be talking publicly, at least, more about his fury at, the breaches of secrecy, within the administration and finding the leakers and so forth. So, I mean, look, I do think, though, I mean, it looked like a very solid report in the Post, and it certainly reveals some vulnerabilities going forward, and also some difference of opinion in how the U.S. is prosecuting this war.
We're going to talk a lot more about the technicalities of the munitions shortage coming up here. But by the way, the White House responded to the Washington Post reporting by saying it was 100% fake news. Not so surprising to hear that. And that exchange between Hegseth and Trump, where he was angry about the potential low munitions, never happened. Jake, how much pressure are Republican lawmakers going to feel from their voters over these coming weeks when they go back home and they have to face the music on this war?
Yeah, it's an unpopular war. There's no question about it, as echoes of, although this is a much more narrow conflict, much more narrow than 2006 in Iran. But I mean, you have an unpopular president and an unpopular foreign conflict with a host of ethics scandals on Capitol Hill. I mean, it feels like we're about 20 years ago when Democrats took the majority from Republicans in the House in George W. Bush's final midterm election. And listen, it's not. It doesn't pass the straight face test to say that the Pentagon doesn't need any more money at all for anything, because the Pentagon's asking for like $60 to $80 billion from Congress to do just this.
$67 billion, right? Something like that.
Yeah. That's right. But they've gone as high as $300 billion. I mean, in conversations. This is to replenish depleted weapon systems. I mean, that's partially what this is about. And that is the reason that we're in this long kind of tortured discussion over what we call budget reconciliation, because the Pentagon needs this money and needs it now. And Trump said to me yesterday that this is something that the Pentagon needs. So they clearly need money. I think, if I'm reading the tea leaves, the White House thinks it does put them at a tactical disadvantage to not have this as a secret, to have this information out there. So yeah, I think it's a big political and substantive issue.